Alright, so this is going to be my quarterback rankings for the 2025 NFL season. I do want to stress that this is specifically based on how they performed this past NFL season. So previous accolades do not matter. I do take playoff performance into account, but it's going to be primarily based on statistics, not no eye test, not no discourse about they have better weapons so they're a better quarterback. You know what I mean? Like nothing like that. It's pretty much who were the best quarterbacks this season statistically, and I wanted to have a benchmark of playing at least 4 games to make this list, although I did stretch it because we were so close to 50, so I'm going to have 50 guys here to rank. But let's get started. Starting off at number 50 is going to be Dorian Thompson-Robinson from the Browns. He was very bad this year. He had 6 interceptions, 0 touchdowns. You know, all the stats are right here. I don't need to go through every single one of them, but I'll just kind of list the main ones. But yeah, 6 interceptions, 0 touchdowns is horrible. 140 yards a game is horrible. A 40 passer rating is horrible. He's still a good athlete. He's a dynamic runner as a quarterback, so maybe if he can kind of transition himself to maybe a running back or a wide receiver, because I do think he has skills at that level. He just needs to drastically improve as a passer or think about switching positions. Number 9, Desmond Ridder for the Raiders. He played a few games. He only started 1 game, but he played in what's really equivalent to about 4 games. You know, he had 450 yards, only 123 yards a game, pretty atrocious there. Completion percentage, passer rating, not horrible, but the yards per game is very bad. 2 total touchdowns to 4 turnovers is pretty bad. He's a backup quarterback in this league, but he's not even a good backup quarterback at this moment. Number 48, Spencer Rattler from the New Orleans Saints. So he was a rookie, so he kind of gets a pass, but he was not very good this year. He was like a 3rd or 4th round draft pick, so he doesn't really expect him to be very good. 0-6 in his games that he started. 1,300 yards, 4 to 5 touchdown interception, 3 fumbles in there as well. 150 rushing yards is pretty solid. So I don't hate him too much. He had a solid year compared to what his expectations were, because he didn't expect to play really at all this season, and he got thrown into the mix and wasn't good by any means, but he wasn't completely horrible, and he showed flashes of potentially being a good backup QB in the league. Maybe a low-level starter one day, but at this moment, not looking promising for that. Number 47, Deshaun Watson. He sucks. He sucks, bro. He was number 28 coming into the year when I just ranked only 32 guys, right, because there's 32 starters. So he was among the worst there, but now he comes in as the worst quarterback that was a starter to start the season. So that's a pretty low bar, Deshaun. You're horrible at football. He only averaged 185 total yards a game. 6 total touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Not good, right? Pass rating, completion percentage are fine, but like his yards per game suck. Touchdown turnover ratio sucks, and it's Deshaun Watson, so he just sucks at football and as a person. But the crazy thing is, he might be a better person than he is a football player, because he's that bad of a football player. Number 46, Will Levis. So he was 2-10 in his games that he started. Not very good. Yards per game is fine, roughly 227. But his 13 touchdowns to 12 interceptions with 6 lost fumbles in there as well is pretty bad. 13 to 18 touchdown turnover ratio when he only played in 12 games. Pretty bad. He's tied for 4th in interception. It is an 8-way tie for 4th place, but really playing an equivalent of 10 games and being tied for 4th in interceptions is not a good look for Will Levis. Number 45, Tyler Huntley. He came in as a season unranked, of course, and he finished the year. He looked like a decent backup this year, right? About 193 yards a game. Not great in that aspect, but 5 touchdowns and 5 turnovers with a decent completion percentage and passer rating is about what you expect from any backup quarterback. You would just like his yards per game probably to be a little bit higher. Number 44, Daniel Jones. So, I mean, he got cut by the Giants this year because of how bad he was. I had him ranked as the worst starting quarterback going into this season. He did surpass a couple guys, Will Levis and Deshaun Watson, but that's a pretty low bar to pass. So he was still a very bad quarterback. 233 yards a game is fine. Completion percentage, passer rating are fine. But 10 touchdowns and 9 turnovers, not a great look. at all. He is, I think, still certainly capable of being a solid backup in this league, but I do not think he should be even considered for a starting job anywhere next season. Number 43, Anthony Richardson. So he has one of the biggest fall-offs of my rankings. I had him coming in at number 17. He only played 4 games his rookie year, so I had some hope that maybe he wasn't very good his rookie year either, but I had some hope that he could, progress this offseason, which he really didn't do that, right? He had 8 touchdowns to 12 picks. His rushing stats are good, 500 yards and 6 touchdowns there. But overall, he still had 14 touchdowns to 15 turnovers. Not good. Again, in only 10 games played. So kind of like the same thing with Will Levis. He played 10 games and is still tied for 4th in the league in interceptions. Not a good look. His yards per game are fine, but a lot of that is carried by his 50 rushing yards per game that he does have. So again, rushing ability, amazing. Passing ability, not so much. He also, 47% completion percentage is the worst in the league. That is atrocious. So I still believe in him to do something going forward, right? He still does not have a whole lot of experience. He's played 14 NFL games in his career, so he's essentially, as far as on-the-field product, a rookie this season, right? So you kind of give him a little bit of slack with that, but he certainly needs to improve his passing production, and his rushing ability is solid. Number 42, Gardner Minshew. So he's going to drop quite a bit. He was a decent QB last year when he got in the starting role in Indianapolis, so I thought he was going to be a solid starting quarterback this year. Nothing great, but decent. He really wasn't decent this year. He was pretty bad. 9 touchdowns to 10 interceptions with 4 lost fumbles as well. So 9 to 14 touchdown turnover, atrocious. Aside from that, he was pretty solid, but that's kind of touchdown and turnover is a pretty big part of your game to be your flaw. That is his only flaw, but it's a pretty significant flaw. So again, I think he can be a decent backup in this league for sure, but I do not think he should be really viewed as a potential starter anywhere next season. Number 41 is Jacoby Brissett. So I had the second worst quarterback coming into the year. He did outperform those expectations, I guess, but he was still pretty bad. His touchdown turnover ratio is fine, 2 touchdowns to 1 pick, but he does not turn the ball over, right? That's something that he is good at, but he also doesn't really do anything on offense. He had 148 yards per game, pretty bad. That's really bad. 59% completion percentage is not good, and only 2 total touchdowns in 5 games that he started. This guy doesn't really provide anything. He doesn't turn the ball over. That's his one strength, right? Which is a very good strength. But when you're not doing anything on offense, you're essentially turning the ball over because you're just going to end up punting the ball anyways with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Number 40, Mac Jones. So he came in as unranked, of course. When he got to play for Trevor Lawrence, he actually did a lot better than I expected him to do. He was a good backup quarterback this league, right? This season, he had 220 yards per game, is solid. 8 touchdowns, 8 picks, isn't great. But again, not horrible, right? 9 touchdowns to 10 turnovers, not a great ratio, but his yards per game are decent. Completion percentage and passer rating are certainly passable. He's a good backup quarterback. I would not really expect him to have any sort of market to be even a potential starter next year. I think he goes back as a backup again, but he certainly showed that he's at least capable of being a good backup in this league, which is probably going to be his role going forward. Number 39 is Kenny Pickett. He came in unranked. He is one of the guys I kind of threw in here to stretch my list out to 50 because we were so close. He only started 1 game, played in 5, but really only the equivalent of 2 games, so not a very big sample size, so I will kind of take that account into these rankings here. He had about 153 yards a game, 3 total touchdowns with 1 turnover, which is solid. Completion percentage, not great, but his passer rating was pretty solid at 86. So he really didn't do much, right? He only played really 2 games, accounting all of his, 4 games that he came in relief of Jalen Hurts. He really didn't do much this year, but when he was on the field in the limited time, he was pretty solid. Certainly showed that he, I think, is capable of being a good backup and potentially even a low-level starter in this league, although I'm not really sure he's going to get that chance this next season. Number 38 is Drew Lock. So he was an honorable mention coming in because I had 8 honorable mentions who I thought had a good chance of becoming a starter at some point this season, and of course, Drew Lock ended up doing that. He started 5 games, really only played about the equivalent of those 5 games. He had 240 yards per game, so that's his strong suit. He's really good at moving the ball. right? Eight total touchdowns to 7 interceptions or 7 turnovers. Not a great ratio, but it is at least positive, right? Completion percentage, pass rating, not very good, but he at least is someone that brings some life to the offense. He's not afraid to take shots downfield, and it does work a decent amount of the time. When Drew Lock's in your offense is going to be a lot better than a guy like Daniel Jones or Tommy DeVito or someone like that leading this team. But he does have a lot of turnovers. But solid backup quarterback. Probably not going to be any market for a low-level starter, but he was capable of doing that this year. Number 37, Michael Penix. So he only played about 3 games this year. Another guy that I kind of threw in here to stretch this out. But he was actually pretty solid. The only reason he's not higher on this list is mainly because of the very limited sample size, right? Completion percentage at 58 isn't great either, but 262 yards a game, 4 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Not great, but it is at least positive for a guy who's only played 3 games in his career. Pretty solid start here for Michael Penix, and obviously he's going to be the starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons going forward. Number 36 got Cooper Rush. So he was unranked, of course, coming into the season. He's did pretty good this year as far as his touchdown turnover, right? 12-5 touchdown interception, 3 fumbles, but it's still a 12-8 touchdown to turnover. So really positive in that aspect. Completion percentage and pass rating are both fine. Yards per game at 186, not very good, but with his positive touchdown interception ratio, right? He was a pretty good quarterback this year. He's certainly a good backup QB in this league. Even you can make the argument that he has the potential to be a low-level starter in this league. That of course, is not going to happen with the Dallas Cowboys. But if they're a QB-needy team, right, that wanted to bring Cooper Rush in to be a legitimate, at least QB battle with someone else, he's certainly that guy. Number 35, you got Andy Dalton. He's kind of been the same thing the last few years. He's been a good backup when he had to come in for Bryce Young. He does have a turnover issue, right? 7 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Not a great ratio, but again, it is positive. 204 yards a game isn't nothing special, but he has a pretty good completion percentage at 66 and a solid pass rating at 82. He's a good backup in this league. A low level, he could be a good low level starter on a couple teams, but he's really not going to give any team much value outside of put some source of life at some points, but then he's also going to, again, have quite a bit of turnovers to come with it. Number 34 is Aiden O'Connell. He was an honorable mention coming into the year. He's averaging about 205 yards per game, solid completion percentage and passer rating, a touchdown turnover ratio of 9-6, which is, pretty positive. So I think he definitely improved from where he was a season ago, right? I think he has the potential to be a really good backup in this league or a low-level starter, which has kind of been his role with the Raiders these last couple of years. Number 33 is going to be Mason Rudolph. So he's averaging 233 yards a game. That's his strength. He moves the ball downfield, but he also has 10 turnovers to 10 touchdowns. So a lot of turnovers, right? But he is bringing the touchdowns to go with it, so it's not the worst thing ever. With a solid completion percentage in there as well, he's gonna bring some life to this offense. Certainly a lot more than Will Levis was doing in this offense, but there's turnovers that come with it. But he at least is providing enough offensively that you can live with those turnovers. So I think he's a good low-level. He's a great backup quarterback. I think he could be a good low-level starter for a few teams in this league. Number 32, we got Bryce Young. So he had a much better year than he had a year ago. I had him coming in at number 27. He technically does drop here in these rankings, but as far as the guys he was ranked with at the beginning of the year, he certainly surpassed a few of those men. He had 21 total touchdowns to 11 turnovers. That's really good compared to where he was a season ago. 204 yards a game isn't great. 61% completion isn't great, but we are seeing some improvements. If you just take the last 6 games, right, whenever he came back from getting benched, if you just take the second half of this season, he's probably up here 25, 24, maybe even a couple spots higher than that. He showed a lot of promise in the back half of this season. The front half of the season is kind of weighing him down a little bit. Number 31, you got Jameis Winston. So Jameis Winston has been the same player pretty much his entire career. He had 14 touchdowns to 14 turnovers this year, as expected. He had 275 yards per game, which is great. That was 6th in the league. So he moves the ball down the field quite a bit. He just also has a bajillion turnovers. He played in really 8 games and was tied for 4th in the league in interceptions. Not good, but he also, again, he was amongst the top in yards per game. So it's kind of give and take with Jameis Winston, and he's certainly a good backup in a quality low-level starter in this league. Number 30, you got Marcus Mariota. He was a guy that kind of did also get just thrown into this list to stretch it out to 50. He had the best completion percentage and the best pass rating out of any QBs this season. Although it was, it was in just a couple of games that he played. 5 touchdowns and 0 turnovers. Really good. 228 yards per game. Really solid. But again, with a very limited sample size, I didn't want to put him up too high. I think 30 is a good spot. I think he could easily be a solid starting quarterback if given the opportunity. Number 29 is going to be Trevor Lawrence. So he came in at number 21. He was pretty bad this year. He had 14 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, or 8 turnovers, which not great, but not completely horrible. 216 yards per game is not good for a guy of Trevor Lawrence perceived talent. 60% completion, not good as well. I think we're going to have some uncomfortable conversations if Trevor Lawrence does not improve this year. He had a worse year this year than he did a year ago, right? If he does not improve significantly next year after this season, I think there could be legitimate conversations about Trevor Lawrence being a backup quarterback in this league. He has not really shown improvement at this point in his NFL career. He's only gone backwards these last 2 years, and that's certainly questionable. Number 28, you got Kirk Cousins. So he had probably his best season last year when he was before he was injured. So I had some hope, that he would be somewhat close to that coming into this year, but obviously that was not the case. If you take out his last 6 games of the season, he's probably a lot higher on this list. But those last 6 games that he played, he was pretty atrocious, right? He still had 250 yards per game, which is good, right? But 18 touchdowns to 18 turnovers, absolutely no rushing ability to come with it. Solid completion percentage and passer rating, but his interception tied for first in the league, even though he only played in 14 games. Yards per game are good, but his turnovers are way too high. Number 27 is Malik Willis. So a guy kind of like Marcus Mariota as well. He only played in a couple of games, but he was really, really efficient in those games. Yards per game at 230, 4 touchdowns to 1 fumble, and second in completion percentage and passer rating. Although, again, in only a couple of games, it doesn't really count as far as other guys I'm going to talk about in this video. But he was really good when he did play. Tennessee Titans could use a guy like Malik Willis on their team. Number 26, you got Drake May. So, really good rookie year. Not a really good rookie year, but a good year for a rookie, right? You don't really expect rookies to have great years. We've kind of been blessed with that, in the past couple of years with Jaden Daniels and C.J. Stroud, but Drake May had a solid rookie year as well. 17 touchdowns to 16 turnovers, not a great ratio, but he's a rookie, so you're going to expect him to kind of fix those problems, especially those fumble problems. 245 yards a game. Pretty good. Completion percentage, passer rating, really good for a rookie. And yeah, he had a solid rookie year. I expect him to fix that touchdown turnover ratio a little bit, and easily could be a top half of the quarterbacks coming into next year. Number 25, you got Joe Flacco. So he came in and has kind of done the same thing he's done the last few years. He gets you yards per game, 255. 12 touchdowns in 7 games, pretty good, but he also had 11 interceptions. Well, 11 turnovers, I should say, in that time. Passer rating, completion percentage, again, really solid numbers. He's pretty efficient. Right, not really efficient. He's pretty effective in what he does. Right, moving the ball downfield. He is fairly efficient, but he does have his turnovers that come with it. Number 24, you got Dak Prescott. So he was really bad this year, comparatively, of course. Still a decent quarterback, but last year he had easily had a top 10 season. He was number 7 coming into this year. And he was pretty underwhelming, I should say. 12 touchdowns and 9 turnovers, not great. 250 yards per game is fine. Completion percentage and passer rating is fine, but it is just that touchdown turnover ratio. I don't even think he had 8 interceptions. I'm not sure of the facts of this, but I'm not even sure if he had 8 interceptions all of last year, and he had 8 interceptions in 8 games this year. Not a great ratio here at all for Dak Prescott. Number 23, Caleb Williams. So I had him coming in at number 12. I thought he was going to be the best rookie QB in this class. That was wrong, but he still was a good quarterback this year. A lot of people are, kind of hating on Caleb Williams because of how good Jaden Daniels has been, because of how bad the Bears were. But then again, Caleb Williams had his head coach that was horrible. He got fired this season, right? He had no offensive line, so he wasn't really set up to do good. He did have weapons, but he didn't have the means to execute with those weapons because of the rest of the offense and the coaching staff around him. But still really solid personal performance, 237 yards a game, 20 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, a great ratio. He did have 5 lost fumbles, but again, 20 to 11 touchdown turnover is still really good for a rookie. So good rookie year. I think will easily be a top 16, top half of the quarterbacks coming into next year. Number 22, Russell Wilson. So he had a lot better year than I personally predicted. I feel like he had a lot better year than a lot of people would have predicted after his 2 bad years in Denver. He had 240 yards a game, really solid. A good completion percentage and a really good passer rating of 95. 18 touchdowns to only 9 turnovers, so 2-1 in that aspect. So he was really good here in Pittsburgh, right? Compared to any expectations that he had coming in. I think he's, he definitely showed that he's still a decent starting quarterback this year, right? He still has a couple years left probably of being a starting quarterback before he ends up probably retiring in the next 3 to 4 seasons. But I do not think, I certainly don't think the Steelers should re-sign him because, again, he doesn't really raise anybody's ceiling. He could raise your floor a little bit, but he's not raising anybody's ceiling. Number 21, you got Justin Fields. So again, Russell Wilson's teammate, right? So I think he had a slightly better year, 232 yards per game, solid. Completion percentage of 66, pass rating of 93. Those are drastically improved from where he was just a season ago, right? He also had 10 touchdowns to only 1 turnover in his 6 games that he did really play. So that is a really good ratio there, right? He showed a lot of promise this year, right? Which is really good because coming into the year, right, he was slated to be a backup quarterback with a very, very questionable future. As any potential starting quarterback in this league. But I think he proved this year that he's a good starting quarterback, and he has improved quite a bit from where he was just a year ago. So I do think he should certainly be on a few teams' radars to be a starting quarterback going into next year, and I would love him back in Pittsburgh for a full season. Number 20, you got Aaron Rodgers. So, again, a lot of people say Aaron Rodgers was horrible this year. He's washed. He wasn't horrible by any means. He was still a solid starting quarterback in this league, right? His stats are not, Aaron Rodgers level stats, but he still was pretty solid. He was top 8 in passing yards, right? He was tied for 7th in passing touchdowns, 235 yards a game, pretty solid there. Only 28 touchdowns, 13 turnovers, really good ratio there. He's easily a good quarterback this year. Just obviously the Jets season didn't go the way a lot of people thought it was going to, so they kind of put all that blame on Aaron Rodgers and just say that he sucks. He had a good year. He had a way better year than Zach Wilson ever had in New York, but just because their record, was still really bad, people are saying, "Oh, bring Zach Wilson back." I'm like, bruh, Aaron Rodgers, as far as off the field and locker room stuff, very well could have been the issue, but Aaron Rodgers' on-field production was not the issue with this team. Number 19, you got Jordan Love. So he was coming in at number 14, and he's going to fall a little bit there. A lot of that, I wouldn't say a lot of that, but some of that does come from his 3 interceptions that he had in that one playoff game. Not a good look. He did have 25 touchdowns this year, which is tied for 10th in the league. Solid there. But 11 interceptions isn't horrible either. 230 yards a game, pretty solid. But really, he was certainly a good quarterback, but he'd probably be a couple spots higher on this list if he did not have those 3 interceptions in that one playoff game. Because that is, you put him on the biggest stage, right? Well, the biggest stage to this point, and he just went out and sucked in the playoffs, right? So he's going to drop a few spots, but he's still a good quarterback. Number 18, C.J. Stroud. He drops a lot from where he was last year. He had a top 10 year last year as a rookie quarterback, so I thought he was going to build on that, especially getting Stephon Diggs to this team. He really did not build on that at all. He was still a good quarterback, but certainly nowhere near where he was a year ago. 20 touchdowns to 16 turnovers, tied for 4th there with 12 interceptions. Completion percentage, pass rating, again, those are solid. Yards per game is solid, but again, that touchdown turnover ratio is not good, right? If you want to be an elite quarterback, which C.J. Stroud was just a year ago, you cannot have a barely positive touchdown turnover ratio. Number 17 is Derek Carr. So this is probably surprising for a lot of people, right? The Saints obviously did not have a great year, but Derek Carr was injured, for a large portion of this season, right? When he played he was a good quarterback, a pretty good quarterback for the Saints, right? He was ninth in completion percentage at 68, 10th in pass rating at 101. He was very efficient, 221 yards a game with 16 to 9 touchdown turnover ratio. Pretty solid, right? He's certainly looked like a good starting quarterback this year, which he really hasn't looked like that the past 2 years. I would say he's looked like a decent to mediocre starting QB, and now he actually looked like a good starting quarterback. So progress for Derek Carr in that aspect at least, and going forward, I think he easily still has a few years of being a decent starting quarterback in this league, kind of like he's been the majority of his career. Number 16, you got Kyler Murray. So I personally still believe that Kyler Murray can be a franchise quarterback. He's physically talented. Rushing stats are great, right? His total efficiency is pretty good there. 7th in completion percentage, really good. 260 yards per game is pretty good as well. 26 to 15 touchdown turnover ratio is solid. You would like those turnovers to come down a little bit as well, but he's still overall certainly a dynamic talent. If he can, flesh out that turnover issue just a little bit more, he could easily be a top 10 quarterback next year. Number 15, you got Geno Smith. So last year he had a down year from where he was the year before, right? But this year I think he kind of took that step up. So 2 years ago, great, right? 2 years ago, great. Last year took a step back. This year he took a step back forward to where he was about 2 years ago. So he was 4th in passing yards total. Really good. 3rd in interceptions, though. That's kind of a problem. 5th in completion percentage, and then 7th in yards per game. So a lot of stats there in the top 10. Obviously, interceptions is not a good thing to be, so that is why he drops a few spots there. But he was pretty efficient. When he messed up, he really just threw interceptions, right? That's kind of the times that he messed up. He doesn't really mess up just missing on a pass. He misses on a pass badly, and it gets picked off. But still easily a good quarterback in this league. Number 14, you got Bo Nix. He had a great rookie season. Obviously not the best rookie quarterback season this year, but better than Caleb Williams, who was drafted ahead of him, right? So that is a good look. Better than Drake May, who was drafted ahead of him. So that's a good look here for Bo Nix. He was number 6 in passing touchdowns this year with 29. He also was tied for 4th in interceptions, though. But again, as a rookie, leading the league in interceptions isn't a horrible thing. I think he could easily crack down on those coming into next year. Also, he didn't have any lost fumbles this year, which is really good for a rookie. He had 4 touchdowns to add there as well. He also had a receiving touchdown. He had 34 total touchdowns this year to 12 turnovers. Really good ratio there. He could easily be top 10 quarterback next season, and easily could be a franchise quarterback for the Denver Broncos for the next 10 years based on what I've seen right now. Number 13, you got Matthew Stafford. So he's kind of been the same guy the last 5 years, right? He's never been he's been a top 10 quarterback before, but since he's been in LA, I don't think he's really ever been a top 10 quarterback, even when he won the Super Bowl. So he's kind of been borderline in that area, which is, again, where he was this year. 20 touchdowns to 10 turnovers, good completion percentage, and good passer rating, solid yards per game. He's just a consistently good quarterback. But hasn't really been a great quarterback recently. Number 12, you got Brock Purdy. He's been really solid this year. Number 10 in passing yards, but also tied 4th in interceptions. Not great there. He was 4th in total yards per game as well. So really good at gaining yards, right? He just also has a lot of turnovers to go with it. 25 touchdowns to 15 turnovers. He really needs to get those turnovers down a little bit if he wants this Niners team to make any sort of a title contending run. But he does have all the weapons to be great. He was just their whole team was just very much injured this year, which probably is the reason why he's not a little bit higher on this list. Number 11, you got Sam Darnold. So he very much outperformed where anyone thought he was going to be this year, right? If you say that you thought Sam Darnold was going to be borderline top 10 quarterback this year, I'm just simply not going to believe you. I'm sorry, my music cut out, but I'm just simply not going to believe you if you said that. But he was really good. Number 5 in touchdowns, number 5 in yards, also 4th in interceptions. But again, there's an 8-way tie there, so it's not horrible. 6th in passer rating, 8th in total yards per game. Great. 36 total touchdowns to 16 turnovers. Really good ratio there. Sam Darnold was a really good quarterback this year, right? It's going to be very difficult for him to replicate that next year, and that's kind of why his free agency is very, very concerning, because you don't know if he's going to be this Sam Darnold or what he was the last 2 weeks of the season, including the playoffs where he was atrocious. Number 10, you got Jared Goff. So He would probably be high on this list if he did not have 4 turnovers in the one playoff game we did play. He was second in yards, fourth in touchdowns, second in completion percentage, and second in passer rating. Those are great statistics. Also was fourth in, interceptions, which obviously isn't great, and that 4 interception or the 4 turnovers in the one playoff game do not help him at all. But he was still a great quarterback this year, easily a top 10 quarterback in my opinion. Number 9, you got Tua. So a lot of people hate on Tua. I don't know why you hate on Tua. A lot of the reason probably is because injuries, right? He gets too many concussions. Not necessarily his fault, right? He's been a good quarterback when he's on the field. He's been a great quarterback, in my opinion, when he's on the field. First in completion percentage, that's really good. Tied for 8th in passer rating, tied for 9th in total yards per game, right? He had 19 touchdowns to only 9 turnovers. That's over a 2-to-1 ratio. He's been a great quarterback when he's on the field. He just needs to be on the field more. Number 8, you got Justin Herbert. So he was number 5 coming in. I think he was number 5 probably going in. Going into the playoffs. But he had 4 interceptions in one playoff game after having 3 interceptions all year. Not a good look. 9th in yards per game, 7th in passer rating. But really just where this comes down is his 4 interception playoff game does drag him down quite a bit of spots here. Having only 5 turnovers all season, a great look. 25 to 5 touchdown turnover ratio is amazing. But when you go out there and nearly match your turnover total in one game in the playoffs, not a good look. So I do drop him a few spots because of that. Number 7, you got Jaden Daniels. My opinion, the best rookie quarterback season of all time. You can argue with that, but it's pretty much between him and C.J. Stroud because almost everybody was saying C.J. Stroud had the best rookie QB season a year ago, and I think Jaden Daniels surpassed that. He was number 10, tied for 10th in passing touchdowns, 6th in completion percentage, also had 900 rushing yards, easily the most out of any rookie quarterback. 6 touchdowns there as well. 31 to 9 touchdown turnover ratio is amazing. Having 0 fumbles as a rookie quarterback who does that much rushing is a great sign for his future. Easily top 10 quarterback, has the potential to easily be a top 5 quarterback next year. Number 6, Baker Mayfield. So he came in at number 23 last year. He was probably like 17 or so, right in the middle. I expected him to take a small step back this season, but he actually took another pretty big step up. He was 3rd in yards, tied for 2nd in touchdowns. Did lead the league in interceptions, but he had so many touchdowns that doesn't really matter. 3rd in completion percentage, 4th in passer rating, 3rd in yards per game. Absolutely amazing. He threw a lot of picks, sure, but he still had like a 2.5 to 1 touchdown turnover ratio, which is really good, right? Amongst the top in yards per game and efficiency ratings there as well. So easily top 10 quarterback. My personal opinion, number 6. Argue with the wall. The stats are right in front of you. Number 5, Jalen Hurts. So he probably wouldn't be number 5 if he did not win the Super Bowl, but he had a good playoff run himself and Super Bowl MVP and all that. I'm gonna boost him up a couple of spots here. Nothing really eye-popping about his stats. His completion percentage and pass rating are really good. 14 rushing touchdowns, obviously a lot. A lot of that is, from the tush push, so you can kind of diminish that a little bit if you want to. But overall, he had 32 touchdowns and 10 turnovers, which is really good. Very efficient. Yards per game, not like amazing, but when you have Saquon Barkley on your team, you don't necessarily. You're not going to have 270 yards of passing a game when you have Saquon Barkley on your roster. It's just not going to happen. But he was top 5 quarterback in my opinion. Kind of carried a couple spots with that Super Bowl victory. Number 4, you got Patrick Mahomes. So a lot of people were saying Patrick Mahomes was really bad this year. I mean, comparatively to his previous seasons, sure. But I think he's easily still a top 5 quarterback in my opinion. He was 7th in yards, 9th in touchdowns, 10th in completion percentage, and 10th in yards per game. Right. He also didn't play one game. He was still top 10 in 4 categories, missing a game. Only 11 turnovers, right? So 28 to 11 touchdown turnover. Really good there. Very efficient as well. So yards per game, 265, really solid. His playoff performances also in the 2 games leading up to the Super Bowl were really good. Super Bowl wasn't great, but he still had 3 touchdowns to 2 So I think he had 2 touchdowns and 3 turnovers in that playoff game. So not great, or in the Super Bowl, obviously, but still 2 good playoff games leading up to that, and still had a really solid season this year. Number 3, you got Josh Allen. I think I said this multiple times in other videos that he is not the best quarterback in the league, even though he did win MVP. He's tied for 7th in touchdowns at 28, tied for 8th in passer rating at 101. He also had 12 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown that he threw to himself this season. So 41 total touchdowns to only 8 total turnovers is amazing. Yards per game at 250, nothing spectacular which is kind of surprising considering he also had a good amount of rushing yards. And so I thought his yards per game would be a little bit higher than that, but he was still very much an elite quarterback this year, just not better than the other 2 guys ahead of him. Number 2, you got Lamar Jackson. So he was 6th in yards at 4,100, tied for 2nd in touchdowns at 41, only had 4 interceptions. So a 10-to-1 touchdown interception ratio is amazing. Overall touchdown turnover is 45-9, which is still 5-1, which is amazing. He was 1st in passer rating at 119, 2nd in yards per game at 299. He was elite. This was probably his best season of his career, and he didn't win MVP because Josh Allen hasn't won an MVP before, and the MVP fatigue and that crap. But he was easily 2nd best quarterback in my opinion. And then number 1 is going to be Joe Burrow, of course. He led the league in almost all the main categories, almost nearly 5,000 yards, right? 1st in yards per game, 1st in total yards, 1st in passing touchdowns, 4th in completion percentage, 3rd in passer rating. He did have more turnovers than some of the other guys like Lamar and Josh Allen, but 49-14 is still a really good ratio there, so I'm not really going to fault him for that. And then missing players, we got Zach Wilson, Jarrett Stidham, and Nick Mullins. These were guys that came into the year I thought had a decent shot of taking over the starting job at some point, because that's kind of what the preseason has been telling us. But obviously these guys didn't play, so they're missing on our list. And then I'm going to have a simple view here for you guys. You guys can look at this yourself, kind of just list all of them, 1 through 50 on just one screen, so it's kind of a lot easier to refresh your mind and look at this for future reference if you wanted to. But that is going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching. I will have other positional rankings coming out later this week, so make sure to be tuned in for those.